Hey, hello everyone. Once again, module number 4, cognitive development in the first year. My name is Nadeem Sikander. Again, the email address is right on the first slide. We'll be looking at the first year cognitive development. So this entire focus of this presentation will be the first year, which is one of the most critical year of child's development. So we mentioned earlier that we will be looking at John Piaget's work. Piaget's theory, especially the sensory motor stage, which according to Piaget is the stage when children learn and develop. Now that we know from the previous modules that we learned a bit about cognitive development, overall the next few modules will be going over even deeper into cognitive development. This module will look at the cognitive development during the first year of life, beginning with birth. We will also take a closer look at the Piaget's work or theory, especially looking at the sensory motor stage, which according to Piaget is the stage when children learn and develop. So let's look at a little bit about a sensory motor stage. During the first year, according to Piaget, a child is in a sensory motor stage where she remain until the age of 2. So Piaget theorized, his theory says that during this stage, infants learn by doing things, such as hearing, looking, grasping, touching, and sucking. And that's when he says it's a sensory motor stage. This process of learning begins with the child becoming combining with the movement of body and with sensory data. Infants will intentionally attempt to have an interaction with their environment. And then they learn that particular action will have a specific consequence. So ultimately, this sets up the way an infant understands how cause and effect work, right? So we covered an overview of Piaget's work in module number 3. If you wanted to watch that, that's previous module. And if you read that, you will know that Piaget believed that the cognitive development, which is the mental and intellectual development, could be separated into 4 different stages. So when creating his theory, Piaget divided this stage into 6 substages. For example, for which actually all of that occurs within the first year. He says there's a stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. Stage 1, from birth to first month. Infant uses their reflexes exclusively to explore their world, and they have limited cognitive abilities. So they don't have the capabilities to do any cognitive work, or perhaps limited. Stage 2 is from 1 month to 4 months. Infants engage in certain behaviors that produce effects, but these are accidental effects. Once they do this, they will repeat the same behavior to repeat the effect. They don't know about it, but they just know that there are accidental effects. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Once they do that, they will repeat it to see the effect. An example for that would be when an infant learns to suck a toy or something. It takes several trials and trial and error attempts before they learn to use it correctly, right? So if they're sucking on something that they're not supposed to, it'll be a trial and error process in which they will end up learning how to do it the right way. Stage 3 is 4 months to 8 months. Infants will begin to explore how their behavior have an impact on their environment. Stage 4, 8 months to 12 months. Infants will start using behaviors that will help them to achieve a goal. So these are the 4 stages. We'll get into each one of them separately. So object permanence. Another critical part of sensory motor stage is the concept of object permanence. This is defined as the infant's knowledge that out of sight object could still exist, even if he or she cannot see. For example, before this stage, right, if they see an object in the room and then it gets moved to a different room. So they see an object in one room and then it is moved to a different room. They might not realize that object exists, right? That's previously there that they do not know, because at some point they do not know an object actually exists, because the object is in one room and you move it from one room to the next room, and for them they do not even know that object actually exists. However, by about 9 months, the child will be looking for this object. He will be searching for it, even if it is outside of their field of vision. So at 9 months, now they're really on a scavenger hunt to find out where that object go. But prior to that, they don't have, because out of sight, out of mind, they see it somewhere, but if it's moved to them, it doesn't exist. Let's talk about schemas. So there are other important concepts that Piaget introduced in his theory. For instance, he introduced the concept of schemas. We talked a little bit broadly about schemas, but now let's get into it. These are the thinking processes that an infant goes through. In this period, the schemas coordinate perception, sensory, and motor information so that an infant will over time develop a mental representation. In other words, an infant reflexes will give them the basis of each schema, which gives them the basis for their representational thinking. For instance, an infant will touch a toy that makes sound, right? He touches a rattle over and over again because that toy makes a sound, and then learn to identify a rattle by forming an image of the rattle in their mind. So first he touches this because it makes the sound, then he makes the mental image to know what a rattle is. Adaptation and equilibrium, and that's an important slide. Furthermore, Piaget introduced another concept in his theory, adaptation and equilibrium. The latter was briefly discussed in the module number 3. The equilibrium, we talked briefly about it. But here we were going to give more information about equilibrium. We did talk about adaptation. According to Piaget's theory, it takes 2 different processes, adaptation and equilibrium, to create a cognitive development. Adaptation is based on the concept that the children change their behavior in order to meet situational demands. It consists of 2 sub-processes, assimilation and accommodation. We talked about assimilation and accommodation before, but let's go into that again. Assimilation is the process in which the infant applies the previous concepts they have learned to new concept that they are learning. So assimilation is a concept that the child has some access to, bringing of the previous concept and learn the new concept. Going forward, for example, a child might recognize a whale as a fish. The child looks at the whale as that's a fish. Accommodation, on the other hand, is a process in which the child alters their previous concept when they are given new information. For instance, a child will discover that all creatures that live in ocean are not all fish. They didn't have that information before. And then they will learn that whale is not a fish as well, but a mammal, right? So what would you call that, right? You have the assimilation, which is your previous know-how, and that would be what you know before and what you learn new. That's the accommodation. So equilibrium, the term Piaget used to describe the infant's ability to adapt, is also the infant's ability to search for a balance between themselves and the world. So equilibrium involves matching the way the infant functions to demands of their environment. So assimilation is the previous information. Accommodation, you learn the new information, but the equilibrium is the balance. How are you going to balance it, right? Not necessarily every new information is you're just going to run with it, but how are you going to balance it? So Piaget says that it's the process in which you have the information gets balanced. For instance, equilibrium occurs when the child realizes that they are not the only member in the family, and they are member of one large family, and not at the center of the world's attention, right? That child realizes. So thus equilibrium helps the child to understand, what is it? It's called reality. I'm not the center of attention. I am not the center of the world's attention. I am not the only member in the world's family. I am a part of a larger family, right? So a child begins to realize that this equilibrium helps the child to understand the reality, and that's the reality, right? And it keeps the infant moving well along with their developmental path. And it's important because you have the assimilation, you have the accommodation, you learn the new information. Oh my God, I'm so important. But then you have a reality check on you, and you say, oh my goodness, I'm not the only guy. I'm not the center of the attention, because sometimes people, there are 40 years old children, right? So they just don't come out of this cocoon that they're not the center of the attention. They're not the only people that exist. At some point in life, they definitely missed the equilibrium part. Finally, that allows them to make more effective decisions as they grow. So, and I think that's really important for us to know, and that's happening all at the first year, by the way. So let's move on to the next one. When does the development of cognitive brain begin? To surprise of many, cognitive development begins when the baby is still in the womb. For instance, if a mother watches a favorite program on a television, maybe a repeated Bollywood movie or a repeated songs or something that they're just in love with, finally, or perhaps they're reading like a religious scripture, or they're just doing some meditation and they're making certain sound. So during the final months of pregnancy, when the baby is born, it is likely that they will be familiar with the signature theme, right? So maybe, when you're pregnant, it's good to have a healthy programs that you look at and you begin that, because the baby likely to have this signature theme. So if somehow we're listening to some, strange things, then obviously the cognitive development gets affected. And this is cognitive development in action, that the baby in the womb is actually developing the signature theme of what you're listening to repeatedly, and all of that. One way to see this is real in time is to, if you really want to see that as an experiment, you tie baby's foot with a ribbon and perhaps like a toy that makes sound. If you watch the baby that's 2 months old, you will notice that the baby will kick more to see the toy making the sound. But if you try this a couple of days later, the baby will not remember that. Maybe you've forgotten. But at 6 months, however, if you repeat the same experiment, the baby will remember this for about 2 weeks. So this concept is known as recognition. And it is when the baby makes the connection between their action and a result. So that is at the 6 months. Though babies have some sense of memory when still in womb, complex memories such as action and reaction, they're not developed. So because they do develop later in age, like when they're 6 months old, but not at the younger level when they're 2 months old. However, at this time, parent will notice that they begin using, like at the 6 months of age, they begin using gestures, like they will open up their arms for you to pick them up, right? They will make that gesture for you to lift them, and then they'll chew on things, and they will bang on table to get your attention. They will throw toys, and and then they push around things at that age. What I'm trying to say, at that level. So helping a child cognitive development. How can we help a child in their cognitive development, in their intellectual development? And we're still talking about the first year. Most of child's cognitive development occurs naturally. So, but a parent can play an important role in helping along. Over the past century, parents have become more interested in learning about how to help child develop. As a result, children today are brighter than before on average. This means that how a parent interacts with the child is certainly matters. Right from the time baby is born, they will begin learning. A newborn is recognize the smell and the voice of their family. They will study faces, and even they copy their lip movements. A baby learned by doing things over and over again. So it's like repeatedly doing things. So playing simple games can be very helpful to improve their cognitive development. However, giving them toys is a good idea, but giving them too many toys may be distracting, right? So give them some toys that are age appropriate for them to play with, so they can cognitively develop their processing. You're having them build some blocks, and they knock them down and they rebuild them. But if you put too many toys around them, then forget about building anything. Then it's just like from one toy to the next toy to the next toy to the next toy, and that's too distracting, and that's not helpful. Once again, we go back to the Piaget's fact. Piaget's theory of cognitive development also considered two distinct processes. I want you to remember that: adaptation and equilibrium to foster cognitive advancement. Adaptation refers to a child's ability to change his or her behavior to meet situational demands, while equilibrium refers to the child's search for balance in the world. When babies learn by leaps and bounds, all babies will develop at their own pace, but it is possible to make prediction when a baby will learn certain things as they grow. Let's move on to that. Newborn to 3 months, a baby will love to hear voices, and they might turn towards voices, and they are high in pitch. So if people who are high in pitch, babies turn their attention towards them. If someone does some simple action, such as sticking their tongue out, the babies will copy the action. However, the baby does not understand what the baby is doing, but that just mimicking or copying it. At this point, they don't really realize that people exist, so newborn to 3 months, they don't realize that there are people who exist, and things exist when not in their sight. So they don't understand something exists at that age, and something moves out of their sight not necessarily exist for them, because they can't process it. In fact, baby doesn't even realize that a parent is the same person, even every time when they see the parent. So if for newborn to 3 months, they don't see the parent as a parent, right? And when you're not there, when you come back, when a parent returns, Baby doesn't really see that, that because they don't have the capability to process that, you as a parent. So and that's why, if you look at the newborn to 3 months, they don't necessarily are afraid of strangers. Anyone who comes in with a warm body, cuddles them, warms them, is for the babies as good. So 3 months to 6 months, by this time, baby, they're making things happen. They are realizing things that we as adults take for granted. So for example, if two toys are at this age, if the two toys are touching one another, the baby, the 3 to 6 months old, know that this is not one toy. So if there is a teddy bear and a toy truck are connected, or a teddy bear or a doggy is connected, they know that that's not one toy. A baby can also categorize at this point, and if the baby is given 6 pictures of a dog, and he will immediately know if there's a picture of a cat. By 6 months, baby will be reaching and grabbing things, and of course, putting things into their mouth. So when I said that, we take things for granted, what I'm referring to is that, look how young we know how to sort things out, how work things out, how to figure things out, and then as young as 3 to 6 months. And if we fail to figure things out as an adults, then that's worth thinking about. So if we can do it that age, we can do it now. 7 months to 9 months. By the time baby is 7 months, they will know their name, and they will be uneasy when unfamiliar people will come to them or places they go to. A baby can also make plans as they go through the day. For example, the baby will choose to crawl. Baby will like roll over to pick up a toy, or go over towards the sofa, something hiding under the sofa. Babies 7 to 9 months also use toys in a way that they were intended to. So they know what the toys really meant. So they know how to push those buttons, how to use them, such as banging the drums and putting things together and knocking them down. Babies at this age also begin copying the actions of others and start testing their limits, such as dropping the spoon and from their high chair, and making parents angry, and see how angry they get. Not necessarily measuring their anger, but just to see the reaction. 9 months to 12 months, a baby at this point will cry when mom or dad leaves, and will cling and whine due to separation anxiety. However, this typically clears up within moments. Babies at this age are much more vocal, and they will begin to form their first word, typically around their first birthday. So they can, sort of form their first word. They will, cry and whine about if some other person or separation anxiety and whatnot. So that's 9 months to 12 months. This slide will take us to the conclusion. What we have learned in this is that the first year of the life in the child's life is filled with development. So for parents to know, and those who are parents, who are becoming parents, that the first year for the child to develop is a very critical year, and many of which can be tracked back to cognitive function of the brain. Piaget has laid out many of these milestones in the theory, which is practiced by doctors, researchers, psychologists around the world. Although I did mention other theories as well, but something that I mentioned that Piaget's work has been heavily used. Cognitive development begins in the womb, and the new aspects of the development are introduced week after week, month after month. As a child develops and grows physically, they also grow mentally and psychologically, which many observant parents can see as they raise their child through the first year. Well, that concludes our the fourth session on the cognitive development. We covered the entire first year, what and how the baby grows, what things happen. So I think we are now time to congrats to all of those who are completed today the module number 4. We shall see you on module number 5. Have a wonderful rest of the day and upcoming weekend. Stay warm. Take good care of yourself.